So this is the first tutorial in a series of tutorials on making a space shooter for the mobile platform. So we're going to be using Unity as our environment, and let's go ahead and start with creating a new project. So the way you create a new project inside of Unity is you go up to File here, and you go down to New Project. And then you're going to get the Unity Project Wizard. So we're going to go ahead and click Browse. For now on my desktop, you generally make it on your desktop for now, and then transfer it over to your hard drive or flash drive in class. So I'm going to right click in here and just make a new folder. And I'm going to call this Mobile Development Projects. So this is where you're going to submit all of your coursework to me. Okay, so inside that folder, the first thing we're going to do is create a new folder. We're going to call this SpaceShooter. All right, I'm going to select that folder. We're going to leave all of the packages unchecked for now. And go ahead and click Create. And that's going to give us this new sort of layout. If you have any other layout that looks different than this, just go to Layout and do 2x3. And that'll give you the same one that we're working with. So there's a couple things we want to look at. And first is our scene view. If I hold Alt and I left click, I can kind of rotate around my scene view. This is where we would actually build our game. The game window here is actually looking through this camera here. You can see that's the camera preview. So this is how our game will look or play. You can see here that there's free aspect, there's all these different sizes. We'll create a custom one when we're ready to build out our game. The next thing over is the hierarchy. This is the list of assets that are actually in our scene. So for example, if we go to Game Object, Create Other, Cube, you'll see we have a cube here. And I'm going to go ahead and name this Ship by right-clicking and going to Rename and naming it Ship. And hitting Enter. So right off the bat, we have a ship object. The next thing in here, the next tab over is a Projects tab. Now you can see we have nothing in our Assets folder. This is actually a physical folder on our hard drive. So if I right click and I go to Show and Explorer, it'll open up this Space Shooter window here, and you can see that it actually has an Assets folder here that we can go into. And if I double click and go into Assets, you can see that this empty area here is the same thing as this here. So I'm going to leave this open just to kind of show you how it correlates. So I'm going to shrink this down. And I'm going to right click and create a new folder in here. And just call this Models. And hit Enter. Now if I go back to that folder, what you'll notice inside of Assets is it created a Models folder and a models.meta folder. Now the .meta is a directory where everything is sort of linked together. So Unity knows the path of all this stuff. For example, where the Models folder is. I'm going to double click the Models folder here, and I'm going to create something called a prefab. Now, what prefabs are, if you're familiar with Maya, they're similar to Maya's instance objects. What that means is you can create a single prefab, and if I adjust the scaling or any values on that prefab, it'll adjust any duplicates. We're not going to have any duplicates of this ship for now. We will, though, of our enemy. So we're going to have to really utilize the prefab thing when it comes to our enemy. But for now, don't worry too much about that. So let's go ahead and create a ship prefab. There's two ways of doing it. There's the first way, which is you can right-click on the Models folder, go to Create, and go to Prefab. There's another way of doing it that's a little bit quicker, which is you just grab your ship here, and I drag it right into my Models folder. And that automatically creates a prefab. So if I delete it from here, I now have a ship that I can use. So let's take a look at duplicating this guy a bunch of times, right? Now, if I scale this guy up, like I said, because he's a prefab, if I just hit apply, it'll update all the others. That kind of makes a little better sense. Now, let's delete this guy from here. What I want to do, though, is I want to add the word prefab after ship. And that's going to help me to understand that this is a prefab, or identify that within my scene. All right, the next thing I want to do is give this guy a material so he shows up in the scene. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's right click in here, go to Create, and go to Material. And I'm going to drag this material on top of my ship prefab. I'm going to right click and rename my material. Let's see. Well, if you left click once on the word, you can also rename it. But I'm just going to name it Ship. And I'm going to change it from diffuse to vertex lit. And I'm going to make the color, my emissive color, maybe more of a red. And what that'll do is when I change my my other colors, there we go. So now my ship is red. Well, let's make it, I don't know, green, something like that. All right. Let's also select our main camera and change this to make it more of a top-down shooter. Let's do orthographic. So now you can see that we have it straight on. And let's position our camera a little bit lower. And place our ship right in the center. So something like this. And maybe we'll pull this back just a little bit. Okay. Looks good. All right. So let's go ahead and create another folder. And let's, before this tutorial is over, let's just create a scripts folder. And within that folder, let's start taking a look at coding our ship's movement. So go ahead and create a C# script. We're going to call this ship movement. Or just ship for now, because this is going to be all of the code that goes into controlling our ship. Now, I'm going to select my ship prefab here, and I'm going to drag this script onto it. And so what that's going to do is anything I do to this code will now affect this ship. All right. Let's double click this, our ship script. So by default, Unity automatically creates two methods for you. And one is void start. And what void start does is any code I place between these two curly braces here will run at the very beginning or the start, and it only runs once. Update runs every frame or every cycle of your clock. So you can think about it running every 1 second or every 30. If you think about there's 30 frames in a second, it runs a 30th of a second. But it's also based on your system speed. So let's take a look at making our ship move. If we select our ship prefab, you can see here that it has a transform, a box collider, and all this other stuff. All of these guys are highly scriptable. So let's take a look at our x-axis. If I left click and I just drag left and right, I want to code my x-axis as movement, right? So what I want to do is I actually want to just use this transform component. So all I have to do is just write the word transform. You can see that it comes up. And I'm going to double click that. And then if I put a period behind it, you'll see that it IntelliSenses all the different stuff or attributes, like classes and methods and stuff that I can use. I just want to translate it. So I'm going to hit T, R, and there you go, I have translate. Now, translate is also a method that's found in a class, and we're going to get into classes later. So just think about it as something that you'd have to use parentheses for. So inside of here, our translate method takes one attribute for now. If you're not sure, like, well, how do I know that or whatever, I can actually highlight this. And I can either right-click, and I can go to, let's see, let's highlight it and let's go to Help, Unity API Reference. And you'll see that it brings up transform.translate. And it tells you, it moves the transform in the direction and distance of translation. So you can see here it says vector3.forward, right? Well, what we want to do is we want to move it to the right, because the right is the x-axis. The z-axis is forward, okay? So how would we do that? Well, a vector3 is a way of looking at all three of these, or storing all three of these x, y, and z coordinates at the same time. So I'm just going to type vector3 dot right. And I'm going to multiply that, because right now all we're saying is we want to translate it vector3 to the right, but we're not saying by how much. Well, there's another way of doing it by registering the input dot get axis. And axis is another way of saying the amount of pressure that's pressed on the left and right arrow keys or the A and D key. Now, they already have this coded for us by, or tagged, or the A and D key and the left and right key are already, they're already mapped to the word horizontal. Now, the way I know that is because if you look inside of Unity's settings, so if we go to Edit and we go to Project Settings, Input, if we go to Axes here, you can see that there's all of this stuff that's already mapped. And if I expand horizontal, you can see that it is mapped to the x-axis. I'm not sure why it doesn't say A and D. In previous versions it has. Maybe it's mapped to this one. Yeah, there we go. A and D, left and right arrow keys. So you can see that here. And you can create your own axis by expanding this to 16, and we'll do that in future tutorials. Okay? So let me go ahead and hit Control S to save this. And I'm going to hit Control Shift and C here. Looks like we don't have any errors. The console window can also be found here, which is Window Console. And I'm going to press play, and I'm going to press my A and D key. You can see it moves. It moves a little quickly. Now there's a problem with this code. And what that is we want it to be according to the system's time. Right now it's based on the power of my computer. So if your computer is more powerful than mine, your ship will actually move a lot quicker. So how do we get it so everything is consistent across multiple platforms, whether it's Android or the PC or whatever? Well, we multiply it all by the time of the computer. So I do time dot delta time. Now I'm going to hit Control S, and you're going to see that it's going to run a lot slower. So if I press play here, and I press left and right, you can see it moves a great deal slower. So while I have a few minutes left in this tutorial, I want to show you how to create global variables. Okay, so if we, outside of our methods here, I create a variable and I just call it integer speed, and I make it equal to 0, and I put a semicolon here, right? And I save this. If I click back on my ship here, you can see that in my ship script, let's see, do we have to identify it as a public variable? Let's see, maybe we do public int speed. Let's try that and jump back into Unity. There we go, 0. So we can time it out in our view to whatever we want. We can update this 0 variable, but right now it doesn't do anything. So let's go ahead and multiply all of this again times speed, which is the variable that we just created. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see that. So I'm multiplying the axis that I'm pressing times the current time times speed. So let's go ahead and save this, and let's play around with this number. So I'm going to make this, let's make this 100. Let's make sure that's saved. Yeah, it looks like it's saved. Okay. So I'm going to press play, and that's way too quick. Okay, so let's take this down to 10. And that's a little better and much smoother. Okay, that's the end of this tutorial.